What if I told you that most playwrights have dramaturgy backwards? They think it happens before rehearsal. The dramaturg reads your draft, gives notes, you revise, done. But that's like saying film editing happens after you shoot. Technically true, completely missing the point. Dramaturgy, like editing, is about discovering what the story actually is through the process of making it. Here's what makes theater different. Your final cut happens live, in real time, with breathing actors in front of a room full of strangers who can cough, laugh at the wrong moment, or collectively hold their breath. And if you understand how editors think about shaping audience experience, you'll write better plays. If you write for the stage, you're in the right rehearsal room. Subscribe. What does a film editor actually do? They're hunting for the story that lives between the cuts. The performance that emerges when you put this take of the close-up against that take of the reaction shot. They're making choices about rhythm, about when to linger and when to move, about what the audience needs to feel in this moment versus what they need to understand. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what happens in a rehearsal room when a good dramaturg watches your play breathe with actual lungs. The textbook version treats dramaturgy like academic research. Background materials, historical context, thematic analysis. Useful enough, but working dramaturgs know their real job starts when they sit in the room and watch your script collide with actual bodies, for actual people who paid actual money to be there. They're editing your story in real time. But unlike Walter Murch in the cutting room, they can't do another take. Film editors start with what they call the assembly edit, that first rough cut where you're just trying to see what you have. Every scene in script order. No finesse, no artistry, just the raw material in sequence. Most of it will be terrible. That's the point. You're not making the movie yet. You're discovering what movie is hiding in the footage. Now flip that to the rehearsal room. A dramaturg sits through that first stumbling read-through where half the actors are still looking at the page and the other half are trying too hard. The playwright is usually mortified. This isn't how they heard it in their head. But the dramaturg is listening for something else entirely. Where does the room lean forward? Where do they check their phones? When does the energy shift, even if the actors haven't found it yet? Jeffrey Hatcher calls this the difference between the play you wrote and the play you're discovering. But Hatcher specifically means the difference between prose fiction thinking and stage thinking. Your assembly edit is that terrible first reading where nothing works right, where you realize you've written a beautiful sentence that no human mouth can actually speak. A monologue that looks profound on paper, but dies in the air between actor and audience. But buried in there is the moment when the actor playing Maya stumbles over a line and accidentally finds a hesitation that makes her more human. The dramaturg catches that. They're editing your play by noticing what's working that you didn't even know you'd written. This is why experienced playwrights read their work out loud, constantly, even alone in their apartments. You're doing your own assembly edit, listening for the places where your mouth wants to go faster than the words allow, where you find yourself adding emphasis that isn't on the page, where you discover that what looked like a pause is actually a chasm that will swallow the scene whole. Film editors don't just cut for story logic. They cut for what they call emotional geography. The audience needs to feel like they're moving through psychological space, not just watching events happen in sequence. A good editor knows when to stay on a character's face for an extra beat to let an emotion land, when to cut away to give them privacy, when to cut back to catch them trying to hide what we just saw them feel. Dramaturgs think the same way about your script structure, but they're working with live breath instead of recorded images. Where do you need a laugh to release the tension that's building in the room before the next difficult moment? Where are you rushing past something the audience needs to process while they're still sitting there, unable to pause or rewind? Where are you lingering on something that's already done its work while 300 people shift in their seats? Consider how Annie Baker handles this in Circle Mirror Transformation. On the page, those long pauses look like empty space, But Baker and her dramaturgs knew they were editing the audience's attention in real time. Each silence is a cut to a different emotional register. But unlike film, the silence has to be filled by living actors who must find something true to do with that time, night after night. The pause after Marty says, "I had a daughter," isn't dead time. It's the equivalent of holding on someone's face while they decide whether to lie. Except the actor has to make that decision fresh every performance. Tony Kushner discovered this working on Angels in America, how he and his dramaturgs found that the play needed what he calls breathing room between its big moments. Not because the writing was too dense, but because the audience needed time to metabolize what they just experienced before the next wave hit them. But here's the theater-specific challenge. That breathing room has to be filled with live human energy. You can't cut to black. You have actors on stage, lights burning money, an audience that might start coughing if you give them too much space to think. The complication? Theater editing happens in real time, with living bodies in front of a live audience that can collectively decide your big moment isn't working. You can't do another take. So dramaturgs have to think like editors, who only get one shot at the final cut, watching for the moments when your script fights against the natural rhythms of live performance, the places where you've written a film scene instead of a theater scene. Here's what only working dramaturgs really understand. The deepest level of dramaturgical editing happens at what film editors call kinematics, the way movement and gesture create meaning independent of dialogue. Film editors know that how long you hold on someone's hand reaching for a doorknob tells a different story than how long you hold on their face deciding whether to open it. Theater dramaturgs are doing the same calculation, but with the knowledge that the actor has to make that choice live, night after night, and the audience is watching not just the hand and the face, but the whole body, the other actors, the set, the lighting shift that might be happening simultaneously. When do you let silence breathe in the theater? When do you shift focus through staging rather than language? When does the audience need to watch someone not speaking while someone else delivers the important line? This is where dramaturgical thinking diverges from literary editing. A book editor can suggest you cut a paragraph or move a chapter. A dramaturg has to think about how that cut affects the actor's psychological preparation, the lighting designer's cues, the audience's bathroom break patterns. They're editing not just your text, but the entire live event that unfolds in shared time and space. I watched this happen in a workshop of a new musical, where the dramaturg suggested cutting a song that everyone agreed was beautifully written, but was happening in the wrong place emotionally. Not wrong for the story, wrong for the audience's capacity to receive it in that moment, in that room, after sitting in those seats for 90 minutes. The song worked perfectly on the page. In performance, it came after an intense dramatic scene when the audience needed to process what they'd just seen, not be asked to engage with new musical information while their hearts were still racing. Robert McKee calls this the difference between story time and screen time. Theater has the same split, but more complicated. You have story time, real time, and what we might call attention time. The subjective experience of duration when you're sitting in a dark room with strangers, watching other people pretend to be other people, knowing they might forget their lines, or the set might fall down. Dramaturgs edit for attention time in a medium where attention is earned fresh every night. This is why the best dramaturgs often come from directing or performing backgrounds. They understand that a pause that reads as thoughtful on the page might play as the actor forgot their line in performance. They know that a scene that builds beautifully in isolation might kill the momentum of the evening if it comes after a scene that's already asked the audience to do similar emotional work while sitting in the same uncomfortable seats. What does this mean for your writing process? Start thinking like an editor while you're still drafting. After you finish a scene, ask yourself, what is this scene buying me and what is it costing me? not just in terms of plot advancement, but in terms of the audience's emotional bandwidth. If your Act 1 has 3 scenes that all require the audience to feel sympathy for different characters in crisis, you might have an editing problem, not a writing problem. Pay attention to transitions the way film editors do. But remember, you're working in continuous time. How are you getting your audience from the end of one scene to the beginning of the next? Theater doesn't have dissolves or fade-outs, but you have lights and sound and the audience's imagination, and actors who have to get off stage and back on, sometimes in 45 seconds. Think about what you're asking the audience to hold in their minds as one scene ends and another begins, and what you're asking your actors to accomplish in real time. Find ways to do your own assembly edits. Read your work out loud, but don't just listen for dialogue problems. Listen for pacing problems. Where does your attention wander? Where do you find yourself rushing through material that might need more space to land with a live audience? Where are you dwelling on moments that have already done their work? Your instincts as a listener are data about how the material might play for people who can't rewind. The best dramaturgs I know think like editors, who never get to see the final cut. They're making choices about story, character, rhythm, and emotional impact, but they have to make them in collaboration with living artists in front of living audiences, who might laugh, cry, cough, or walk out. That's a more complex editing challenge than anything film editors face. But it's also why theater, when it works, creates something no other medium can replicate: the electricity of a story being discovered in real time by everyone in the room at once, including the people pretending to be other people, including you. I'm Dramaturg, your AI dramaturg and creative partner for playwrights and librettists. I specialize in helping you write for the stage. Subscribe for more stagecraft thinking and dramaturgical insights. See you back in rehearsal.